10, 9, 8. Go for main engine start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Okay, I've got the fins on the Vapor, and they are pretty tight. I've still got the guide on this one just to make sure that it dries completely straight up. So what I'm going to do, I've used a few techniques on getting fillets in here. Basically what a fillet is just a kind of a gap filler here that makes a nice smooth transition between the fin and the body tube. And I've used the tight bond, I've used putties and stuff like that, which are successful, but I've tried a different technique of using epoxy and then thinning it out, and that actually works really well. It seems to get the gap filled, and it's not too wide. I don't know if you can see, you probably can't see on this one, but anyways, this one's got that system done on it and works out pretty good. So we're going to do it right now. So what we do is we take equal amounts of the epoxy, and I don't need much because I can only do one fin at a time because it takes about 30 minutes to dry. So I don't want to put it on there and then turn to the next fin and have the epoxy run out. I want to have gravity work for me and go into the gap of the fin, filling all those little air pockets and then making a smooth transition. So we'll take the epoxy, we're going to put both types down in equal amounts, and we're going to mix it around. Okay. And this has a longer mix time than 5-minute epoxy, which can be kind of a pain. You're in a hurry. I mean, if you mix it for 2 minutes, you got 3 minutes to apply it before it starts getting gooey and tacking up. So we got some time with this one. So okay. So now what I'm going to do is I am going to grab the isopropyl alcohol here, get that ready. I've got some Q-tips already prepared. So I'm just going to take the epoxy and I'm going to put just a tiny bit, make sure it goes down to the corner there. But I'm just going to put a tiny bit of it down this gap here. And the reason I don't want to put a lot is because when I push it with the Q-tips, I don't want it to build up too much, and then that makes more cleanup, because it'll actually push most of the epoxy down the way, kind of like just driving a snow blower, just pushing it down. Okay, so we'll get this all filled. Now these fins are really narrow, but they're really long, so hopefully they'll be good fins for flying. It's all an experiment. That's why they call it rocket science. I mean, this is a kit, so they should have tested it and all like that. We did do some modifications, which we'll try to make sure those don't interfere with the flight of the rocket. And then just make sure to get around the edge and then the front little piece of the fin. That way we'll make sure nothing gets underneath it. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my Q-tip, I'm going to dip it in the isopropyl alcohol, 91%. And I'm going to push it and push these down, but I'm going to roll my Q-tip at the same time. That way it picks up some of the epoxy as it goes. And then just throw that away. Don't try to reuse it because you'll just end up smearing the epoxy everywhere. We'll clean up the one side. And like I said, this will make a nice aerodynamic fillet, plus it adds strength to the whole rocket. Okay. Take a good look at it, make sure it's in the gap and there's nothing outside. Okay, so we're going to let that dry. We're going to make sure it stays like this, so gravity will take it down into that gap and fill it. And if we turned it, this stuff could move on you, so we'll let that dry. Okay, I'm still working on the Vapor, and I took a break from it because I had an idea of what I wanted to do and I had to order the parts in. And what this is a baffle. And what baffles are supposed to do is they will actually block the hot gases when the ejection charge goes off, and just keep the pressure going through and not the hot gases. So all the parachute and everything else will be ejected, but it won't burn that system. I'm still going to use the parachute protector, but to keep everything clean, I figured I'd try one of these. The hobby shop that I work at part-time, the owner actually is the guy who invented this version, supposedly, so that's pretty neat. And so let's take a look and see what it is. I ordered this from Apogee Rockets, and from what I've heard on the different forums and so forth is this is about the smallest diameter that you really want to use one of these. It works better on bigger rockets, so but they do make ones for small rockets. So anyways, I tried making this myself, but that was a big disaster because the newer plywoods are almost impossible to cut through. So this was laser cut, super nice and thick, so tried to save a few bucks, but ended up having to spend them anyways and get it ready to go. And that's what the instructions are showing. That's what the completed baffle looks like. The front, one of them goes on the front, one goes on the rear. You can see the holes are offset, so the gases go on one side and they won't go through the other side, but the pressure of the air pressure will. So anyways, they talk about gluing them in with wood glue, but then to coat the surface with epoxy. So we will do that, and it's going to go in. This is the original coupler, and you can see they're identical. So what this is going to do is this one's going to go in there and couple the two on the, again, the Vapor. This is the lower piece here. And I'm just going to go ahead and glue it in. I'm not going to make it modular where you can get at it, so I don't think I'll need to get at it. If it clogs, I can shake loose most of the material through these holes. So we'll get ready to install that. So now this is what the baffle looks like. I have not glued it in yet, but I just test fitted it. It's really super tight. That laser cutting just had the perfect dimensions. So basically this is going to be the back of the rocket, and the ejection charges go through these holes and then out these front little holes right there. Looks like a little pepper shaker, but anyways, what this is going to do is it's going to make it so I don't have to put any recovery wadding in there at all between this and the parachute protector. Should be able to save on that. Reason most people suggest it's for bigger tubes is when you put recovery wadding in there, you have to use a lot of it for the bigger tubes. So some people use a special insulation. You might check that out too. Anyways, so now that we know that fits, we'll go ahead and get that glued up. Okay, using some of my carpenter's glue type bond here. Put some of that on there. And we're just going to apply, we're going to put this one in first, since it seems to be a little easier to get in. Okay, just going to apply some glue on the edge. Okay. And I'm going to do the same as I would with balsa. I'm going to kind of rub it in and then put another layer on. So we're just going to smooth this out. Get in the pores of the wood. Instructions do say it doesn't matter which end is which, but they do show a picture of the which side goes towards the engine, so we'll use that guide as well. Okay. Clean off my fingers here. Okay. So we're going to add the glue here. Okay. I'd like to put baffles in all mine if they work right. I mean, this is kind of an experiment. I've never used a baffle before, so we'll see how well it works. Some people have had them fail. I hope this one doesn't fail, but that's all a part of the rocket science. Okay, so we've got enough in there. We're going to put the disc in. I'm going to put it in kind of sideways, and then I'm going to push on it from the other side since it is a really, really tight fit. So try to get as level as possible. Okay, looking good. Okay, so we are going to let that start to set up. We're going to do the other side, and then we'll be ready to do some epoxying. Okay, I've got the baffle all glued together, and it's pretty well dry. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to coat, actually I'm going to coat both ends because I'm not sure which side I want to put towards the engine. I think it'll be this side, but just for good measure, I'm going to coat both of these with epoxy, and I'm using half-hour epoxy. 5 minute, you could use that, but half hour would be a little better. Anyways, I'm just going to coat this. I got to make sure that I don't get it around the edge, because then it won't fit in the rocket if I let it dry that way. So I'll keep my alcohol at the standby. If I get something on the side, I can wipe it down real quick. So we're going to put out a little bit more than usual of the epoxy. That way I have plenty to cover. And I'll do one side and then I'll do the other side after the one side dries. So, okay. We'll do a mix of the epoxies, yeah, the two of them. So, all right. And for all you people that are watching this, I've been trying to do a lot of videos. I've had more time because of the COVID-19 at home, of course, like a lot of people. But I would appreciate if you hit the like button if you like what you see, and then hit the bell to receive all the different updates and all the new videos that I come out with. And I really appreciate all the support and all that stuff. Of course, in these trying times, it's tough to keep these videos going. But I'm trying to work through it, and just like you guys. So, and be sure to visit my website for some of my modeling tools and so forth. Okay, so we got that mixed, and I'm just going to take it with a toothpick. I don't really need a brush, and I'm just going to kind of smear it around here, making sure it gets into the grain of the wood. Okay. And I could do a couple coats of this too if I want to. It just keeps the wood from charring, because the heat from some of those engines is pretty hot. So now the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little bit on the inside of the wood openings. Not enough to get them clogged up, but just on the inside there to keep them from charring. And yeah, like I said, this is supposed to keep you from needing any of the wadding, which is a good thing. Okay, there we go. Okay, let's put some more on. And I'll probably follow this up after it tacks up with another coat, and set that aside to dry, and then do the other side. Okay, I'm ready to install the baffle into the rocket, and it's all epoxied here, nice and dry and nice and thick, so there won't be any charring on either side, depending on what side I put in there. One of the first things I'm going to do, though, is just in case there's a little bit of an edge of the paper or the epoxy, I'm just going to take my sandpaper and I'm going to roll it with a real fine sandpaper and kind of get that edge down. That way that front part will go in the rocket smoother as well, and make it so it doesn't bind up and stop midway. Okay, that feels pretty smooth. And I need to mark the middle of the tube. So we'll grab my marking guide. Okay. And the tube is actually, this tube that came with the baffle from Apogee is actually the same one as Estes, so it's the same shape and everything. So it's 3 inches, so we want 1.5 inches. So let's put it at 1.5 inches. Put our pencil in there. Put our tube in there. Okay. And then we're just going to do as we usually do and turn it round. Okay, now we got a perfect mark for the center. Okay, now we're ready to put it in. I'm going to put a little bit of glue on both sides, in the rocket and on the baffle itself. And looking at the instructions, like I said, the baffle shows that this side going to the engine says it doesn't matter, but we'll do it that way anyways. So I'm going to put down some glue here and get everything ready to install. Copious amount here because we want a little bit more glue because we don't want this thing stopping mid push. Okay, so I'm just going to take the glue and actually let's get a bigger stick here and we're going to put that in the tube itself. Okay. And we've got quite a bit of tube for the coupler, so we want to put the glue in there pretty deep and all the way around. So we will be quite generous with the glue. Again, it works as lubricant to keep everything moving as well. So okay, so we got a good amount of glue in there and we are ready to push this in, and we're just going to push it until we get to that midway marker. Okay, right there. That's all we need. Okay, now we're ready to put the top of the rocket on, and we'll do that next. Okay, we're ready to put the top of the rocket on, and what we're going to do is use our stick again, but this time I'm going to put glue on both sides, and that way there's going to be enough that it'll push down here and then make a ring at the bottom, and then we can wipe that clean, and that'll work as a to seal the gap too. So we're going to put the glue in here generously. Okay, now then we're going to put some glue around the actual baffle, and this is the same technique if you did just a coupler. So we're going to smooth all this on there, put some more glue down. Takes a lot more glue than you think. Thought I had enough. Okay. I'm trying to work fairly quickly. Okay, so now we're ready to attach the two components, and we will slide this and just keep it going. Okay, and there we go. Now we're going to wipe this off here. Okay. Get another paper towel. Okay. 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 So now the glue has kind of filled that. I'm going to clean it up with a little wet paper towel, and we should be ready to go to the next step. Okay, I'm ready to take the rocket and make some fillets. I was going to actually just use the epoxy, but I figured, well, let's make it super smooth and use the putty on top of that. So what I've done is I've got this one done, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay in the putty, and then I'm going to use this little tool here, which is actually called a dotting tool, and it's just a little ball on the end of a stick here, and it's chrome plated so nothing sticks to it. I'm going to put the putty in the joining area here, and then I'm going to take this, dip it in some thinner, and then press it down and smooth it along, and it's going to make a perfect fillet. This is such a long fin, I do have to do it in sections, but the epoxy looks not too bad, but we're going to make it super perfect here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take some of the putty and we're going to put it on here. And I'm going to take my toothpick and we're going to put some of it in the joint here. And this stuff dries so fast that, like I said, with a rocket this long, I don't really have time to do the whole area. So I'll just do a little bit at a time, so it stays soft enough to conform without it tearing. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the little ball, I'm going to dip it in some of this Model Master metallizer thinner, and then I'm going to, as it's wet, I'm going to start using it and just push it along, clean it up, a little more thinner, just go back, and do it again. Just be careful because it's drying really fast, especially with this thinner. So if it tears, you can go back in and try to redo it. Okay, and then we'll scrape off this extra to make the sanding a little easier. And if the putty starts getting a little bit hard, what I can do is I can put some thinner in a dish here and we can soften it up and get it a little more pliable, a little more workable. But just remember, as this stuff dries, it gets grainy, so you got to be careful of that. So this stuff's getting pretty grainy. I'm not sure how it's going to smooth out with the ball. Let's give it a try. Dunk it in there. Not too bad. And you can see where it actually is not sticking, where the epoxy actually is working as the fillet. So, okay, so we'll finish that up, scrape off the sides with a knife, and then we'll have that fillet, and then that'll be ready to sand. Okay, I'm working on the rocket's fins, and what I've got now, I put the putty on and then smoothed it out with this little roller ball thing here, the dotting tool, and smoothed it out. And now I'm ready to sand. I've sanded these fins already. You can see how fine they've come out. There's hardly any fillet there. If you want more of a fillet, you can use a bigger one of these little ball tools. But now I'm just going to take my sandpaper, this is 400 grit, and I'm going to basically just kind of roll it into a semicircle so it gets down in that crevice. And I'm just going to sand away. And this will get rid of all the extra putty on the sides and down the middle and smooth it way down. So I'll do that, and then I'll finish it off with a 600 grit sandpaper here, and we will come up with something like that. The other thing I'm going to do is my center of the rocket here, which is hard to see because it's pretty tight, is I'm going to put some putty on that as well. I'm going to first sand it with the 400 grit sandpaper to make sure it's smooth. Put the putty on there, and then smooth it with my finger to get it in that crevice, and then sand it down. Okay, I'm ready to fill that gap between the two tubes where the baffle is. I'm just going to take my putty, my red putty here, and we're going to get a little bit of it out here, and we're just going to put it in that crevice there. And then what I'm going to do the first round is I'm just going to press it into the crevice, like so. And then I'm going to go over it a second time. Now I can do this same technique for the rings on the tube, but I'm not too concerned about that anymore. It takes a lot of effort, and sometimes it doesn't actually cover them up very well. So then once that starts to dry, what I'm going to do is just push it into the crevice. So we'll continue with that, and then once that's dry, I'll sand it smooth.